Go there.
All right. We're letting folks in from the waiting room and we're going to get started in just a minute.
Michelle, I think we have everyone in at this point from the waiting room.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are going to get started. We're thrilled to be hosting another community conversation about community planning, which is a part of our ongoing series about planning tools that we can address growth in our community. Today we're talking about neighborhood plans and we're joined by Lynn Chan, who's working on the Gardner neighborhood plan, and a guest from Bozeman to share about the downtown master plan process there. So as we normally do, we'll save time for questions at the end. So feel free to put your questions as they come up in the chat, and that way we can get to them. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A after the presentations. As always, we're recording today and we'll share it on our website. You can find all of our past community conversations at pcecmt.org. And before we get started, I'll do a quick introduction about PCEC and our work. So many of you know me. My name is Michelle Ubaraga, and I have the pleasure of serving as our executive director with an incredible team of staff and volunteers. We are your community conservation group, and we work with people here in Park County to safeguard the land, water, wildlife, and communities in Yellowstone's Northern Gateway. Park County is a traditional homeland and current home to many indigenous people, including the Apsaloka or Crow tribe. And Park County today has a long tradition of human habitation, of people who have loved, cherished, and stewarded this place. And we're committed to working together to honor this legacy. I have a little guest here. This is Mario. So we've been hosting these Zoom conversations about growth and planning in our community for the past several years. Our goal is to host conversations that help us learn and gain a shared understanding of some of the most pressing issues in our community so that we can be more knowledgeable and prepared to advocate together for this place. And there's a lot happening right now. We've been seeing more and more people retreating to gateway communities like ours to live near natural amenities like public lands, the Yellowstone River, and Yellowstone National Park. This trend has been happening for years. And with the COVID pandemic, the increase in new residents in Southwest Montana is really quite remarkable. But we are working together in creating the vision for the community we want to become rather than letting growth happen to us. And that's our goal here today. With that in mind, I want to encourage everyone to get involved in planning decisions in your community. And there's a lot happening across the county right now with Clyde Park updating their growth policy, of course, neighborhood planning here in Gardner. There's water and sewer planning in Cook City. And now that Livingston has updated their growth policy, we're tackling active transportation and downtown planning. So there's a lot going on. And at the county level, the planning board is working on passing conflict mitigation, which is a tool to give more local control over large scale industrial and commercial threats. As many of you know, we've been facing quite a few threats with gold mines, asphalt plants, tire dumps. And this is a really important tool to help us address those concerns at the local level. And I wanted to let folks know that we have a relatively new monthly newsletter that we put together called Crossroads. And it will give a monthly update on all the planning work, meetings that you could attend, with all the links, and there's quite a bit happening in September. So if you haven't signed up, I'd encourage you to do that. I'm wondering maybe Jonathan, if you could, or Carrie could drop a link to Crossroads in the chat here. There's a lot happening in September. Would love to share that and help you get prepared to attend. All right, with that, Mario and I are going to pass the microphone over to Jen, our community planning expert, to set the stage for our conversation today about neighborhood planning. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everyone. Happy September. It's great to be broadcasting from playgrounds and parking lots today. Unfortunately, I'm just still in my little cubicle here. I can't wait to actually meet in person someday. So today we're going to talk about neighborhood plans. And this map I picked out, it's a Sanborn Fire Insurance map. This just happens to be your community of Livingston. This is back from 1907, back when the population, it says on the map there, was 7,000, so pretty big city back in 1907. And as Jonathan mentioned, as we were starting the meeting earlier, the map looks so clean. And it does. And even way back over 100 years ago, you can obviously see, how much planning went into designing the early days of Livingston. And these insurance maps are readily available, and you can look them up. Once again, it's Sanborn, but pretty much every community throughout the country has these maps, and they were published over time. So our conversation today on community planning, neighborhood plans specifically, go back to Montana Code. So my favorite little code book, which is now out of date. Neighborhood plans come from Montana Code. And that's where our growth policy statutes also come from. So this particular section of Montana Code that authorizes growth policies also authorizes the idea of neighborhood plans. And it specifically says a growth policy, so something like the Park County growth policy or the Livingston growth policy, could also include subplans that are referred to as neighborhood plans. And really one of the only caveats is the neighborhood plans need to reflect back to those bigger growth policies. They need to be consistent with the overarching growth policy. So to help us with this discussion today, we've invited two folks, and I really thank both of them, both Chris and Lynn, for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. And we're going to talk about two different types of plans that fit that definition of neighborhood plans. And just quickly to go back, we're talking about a planning tool. Neighborhood planning is a type of planning tool, as are growth policies or community plans. Zoning is yet another planning tool. I've added incorporation here because it is pertinent as far as Gardner is concerned. So Gardner is currently unincorporated. So it ties in its form of government is the Park County Commissioners. So incorporation would be changing the form of government in Gardner and giving them a little more local control. But just to give you an idea of kind of the different kinds of tools out there. So once again, two guest speakers, and this is an informal kind of discussion with these two great individuals. Lynn Chan, I've known her for a number of years. She works for the National Park Service as a landscape architect. She is down reporting from the heart of our favorite national park today. She's going to talk briefly about the Gardner neighborhood plan. This is a planning process that has been in the works for the past, I believe, year and a half, if not 2 years. It's still in a draft stage. It's getting pretty close to going out for further review. And we also have Chris Nauman, who I've also known for a number of years. Chris is currently a senior planner with Sanderson Stewart. He is formerly the executive director from the Bozeman Downtown Partnership, and he's going to give us a little overview of the Bozeman Downtown Plan. So next slide here is just a reminder that the Gardner neighborhood plan needs to be consistent with the Park County growth policy. And Lynn, you can kick it off here. This is the cover of the draft Gardner Neighborhood Plan. And thanks again, Lynn, for joining us and giving us just kind of a quick overview of what the Gardner Neighborhood Plan is all about, kind of the advisory committee that's gone into it. And feel free to let me know when to switch slides.
Thank you, Jen, and thanks everybody for having me on today. As Jen alluded to, I am at Canyon actually meeting with a contractor, so hopefully you cannot see I'm in uniform because I am not representing the park on this call. So just want to straighten that out. So I do live in Gardner. I've lived there for years. Used to live in Livingston, and part of this group that has tried to push forward our neighborhood plan. So Gardner has many efforts behind it in trying to set direction for the town, even before Park County had a neighborhood plan, a growth policy. There were several efforts, but nothing ever went forward. And I think in the last few years, as you all know, visitation to Yellowstone has increased dramatically. And not that Gardner hadn't seen a shift before, but I think you all know in the last 10 years or so, the town has changed a lot there. Because of the additional visitation, we've seen a lot more hotels, we've seen a lot more rental units to visitors, and there was another push to get some direction established, because I think more and more feeling that we're sort of losing our community feel in Gardner, and we need to do something about that. And to Jen's point again, we don't have a town governance because we're not a town, we're incorporated, we're part of Park County. So the last effort we started was, as Jen said, a couple of years ago, we started this with Future West in Livingston, helping us again get the community together and really establish and make sure everybody was on board, or as many people were on board as possible, with the direction that we wanted Gardner to go in. And we had a group steering that effort and it was called Successful Gardner. We went through a community process. We came out the other side with a report. And then we had a sort of a section at the end of that report, back to where Jen was going with, okay, what do you do with actually instituting some direction for your community? We decided to have bring the community together and say, well, how do we govern ourselves? Do we want to continue the same way as we have been doing, which is very ad hoc? Do we want to engage with Park County on a more robust planning effort, or do we want to become incorporated? So out of that effort, the grand majority of folks said, let's go with the interim effort, see if we can pull together a proper planning effort. And then if we want to become incorporated in the future, we've sort of established that direction. We have some plans in place. So with that in mind, we brought Jen in to help us establish this neighborhood plan. And as Jen explained it to us, if we want to establish any actual zoning in Gardner to sort of say, hey, this is a residential area, or anything that says, hey, we don't want high rises in Gardner, or we don't want a nuclear plant next door, or whatever it is, we need to have a neighborhood plan before we can actually do zoning. So we've gone in this direction. A small group of us have been working with Jen over the past year. Yeah, these are the names of our folks, our little working group, which came out of Successful Gardner. to put this neighborhood plan together. The neighborhood plan has goals that were set in place from the successful Gardner effort. So this vision statement that Jen just put up was a vision statement that we crafted, but the essence of it came out of the successful Gardner effort with the community. And so the neighborhood plan that we've put together, and we are now in the process of getting community input on it, puts together the history of Gardner, the community profile of Gardner, and then the goals and strategies are the meat of it, right? So they are trying to set direction for the future and getting everybody on board with that. So go to the next slide, Jen. So here are the actual goals that we have in the plan. I'm sure these look familiar to all of you because I think most communities end up wanting to have the same essence of community. Some of these are more focused on how we see Gardner. Of course, we're still a gateway to Yellowstone. We're still a bit of a frontier town, and we want to keep that essence. But these goals are familiar, I think, to many communities. So a great place to live with a strong sense of community, protected and enhance our historic character, if it doesn't keep burning down, which it seems to. A healthy natural ecosystem, of course, is extremely important to what we think we are in Gardner. Managed physical growth, which we're all trying to do, high quality community services. As we're part of Park County, often we feel we're at the end of the road as far as getting support for infrastructure and things like that. Functioning public infrastructure, just talked about that. Affordable quality housing to meet local needs. This is a huge one for Gardner. I know it is for other communities, but particularly as this gateway to Yellowstone, there is so much opportunity for folks to have rental type businesses in town that we feel there's been a huge push for that, and our housing for employees in Gardner has really struggled. And then a sustainable economy supporting Gardner's vision. So those are the goals that we came up with. Let's go to the next slide, Jen. You're going to have to stay ahead of me because I can't actually remember what they are. So under these goals, we've developed the strategies, right, that we as a community are going to have to work toward in order to meet the goals. So there's a huge part of this in the future that Gardner is going to have to commit to and figure out ways to do in order to try to get there. And I think this is a big challenge for doing a neighborhood plan that really is sort of outside having your own town governance, is to try to figure out how to do tasks with volunteer groups, because in many respects, as we work through these strategies in order to accomplish these goals, we can all as a community get to a place where we agree to do this, but who is going to do this? So I think that as we get the community on board with these strategies, and get the neighborhood plan in place, that is not the end of the road for us. The end of the work is going to be huge and ongoing as we move forward. So let's go to the next. Is there another slide?
That was it for Gardner.
So
That was terrific.
Yeah, so I think for this group, I'm not sure what else to say. Jen described, we have the plan laid out as a draft. We have all these strategies that we've put together that we think will help us get to these goals. And we're kind of in the middle of getting community input for this. If we can get this all together and get enough of the community on board, this goes back to Park County for approval and for them signing off on it, essentially. And then we have a neighborhood plan. And this is really just like a comprehensive plan though. And Jen can explain more about that. It doesn't actually create any zoning for us or any teeth. It creates direction for us. So the next step, if we want to have any requirements of how we want our town to look, is building in those strategies as far as, do we want to do zoning for our town? Is there a place that we want to have design standards, for example? That all comes in the next steps, not in this neighborhood plan. The neighborhood plan just gives us direction.
Yeah, you got it. That was great. Thanks so much, Lynn. So Lynn did a really good job of kind of explaining what a neighborhood plan is in terms of being a visionary document, having a series of goals and strategies. And then bottom line, recognizing that that plan is not regulatory. It's an effort by the community to kind of talk about some foundational things, some important foundational things that lead potentially to regulatory steps. And in Gardner's case, Gardner has the opportunity to stay with the neighborhood plan or move on to next steps. And next steps could be indeed zoning. And a step beyond that too could be incorporation. So as Lynn said, the process is not done, and there's more to come. And certainly just finalizing the neighborhood plan is first and foremost. So now we're going to talk about downtown plans. So downtown plans are also categorized under the neighborhood plan per state statute. And Montana law recognized, neighborhood plans, the importance of neighborhood plans and kind of looking at smaller areas within a community. And then programs like the Montana Main Street program recognize the importance of Montana's downtowns and the importance of planning for the downtown. And so here, of course, is West Yellowstone. Here is beautiful blue sky day in Ennis. This was Sunday. Here is Red Lodge before summer started, blue sky. And here is Bozeman last week. I think this was Friday. So as I stated earlier, we have Chris Nauman, and he is going to do something similar that Lynn did. So basically kind of giving us an overview of Bozeman's downtown plan. And once again, the Bozeman downtown plan needs to be consistent with the overall Bozeman growth policy. So Chris, go ahead and take it away, and I'll give you your first slide here.
Thanks, Jen. And yeah, I would start off by saying, I think hopefully the spectrum of examples from Gardner to Bozeman gives you a sense of, again, the sort of the different scope and scale that these neighborhood plans can take. And I think there's correlations both, say, in considering Livingston, a downtown plan for Livingston. I think there's takeaways from both the Gardner example and the Bozeman example, and certainly Livingston's going to land somewhere in between. So the downtown plan is again, as Jen said, it's a tool, and it's a tool that's been used in Bozeman for quite some time. This is the third iteration of it, and a general rule of thumb, but certainly not set in stone, is a plan like this needs to be updated every 8 to 10 years. And so the original downtown neighborhood plan was adopted in 1998. And then early in my tenure at the Downtown Partnership, we updated that plan in 2009. And then the year before, my departure, we did it once again, which is the plan you're seeing here, and I'm going to talk about today, back in 2019. And again, just to keep hammering home, the statute does require the plan to align, neighborhood plan to align and support and further the community plan, which is also commonly called the growth policy. So again, just for clarification, growth policy and community plan are exactly the same thing. I think, growth policy is the sort of technical wonky term, and community plan it makes a little bit more sense for probably most citizens. So when you already have a growth policy, it's fairly easy then to make sure your neighborhood planning process again complements it. We had the added challenge in 2019 of establishing a new neighborhood plan for downtown while the growth policy was being updated. And so that required a little bit more navigation, but the process was still the same. And so I will back up and to give a bigger picture of how planning works in Bozeman. Bozeman has a large number of plans. It's a highly planned community. Just released a draft plan just this week addressing affordable and community housing. So plans can range again from being these overarching visionary plans to very, very specific plans. So just to give you an idea of how that works in Bozeman, and I'll use the analogy of talking about, how far up in feet each plan sort of considers. So Bozeman has a strategic plan, which is up at 100,000 feet, very broad brush stroked. A new thing for Bozeman that was adopted, I believe, just 3 or 4 years ago by the previous commission. And then the growth policy and the community plan come in, let's just say like at 40,000 feet, drills down a little bit more specifically, but still very visionary. Ours has, these themes that are broadly worded, like a city of neighborhoods, a city bolstered by downtown and complementary districts, a city influenced by mountains, parks, trails, and open space. I mean, you get the idea. They're very broad categories still at the community plan growth policy level. And then in Bozeman, and then specifically for downtown, then we come down a little bit closer to earth and get to 20,000 feet. We have a downtown urban renewal plan, which is a thing in and of itself. And I won't belabor that. And then we get down to like, say, 10,000 feet with the neighborhood plan, the downtown improvement plan. And then finally, which Lynn alluded to, but then to really, in a lot of cases, truly implement those various visions as they get more and more specific coming down through the planning spectrum. That's where you get to things like municipal code, design guidelines, overlay districts, building codes, of course, the International Fire Code. I mean, there's all sorts of very specific implementations that cities can use as tools to bring those visions to fruition. So that's sort of the hierarchy, and the more intensive your community is planned, the more important it is to make sure that hierarchy is very well established and each plan is responding appropriately to one another. And that's how you end up impacting and influencing a great community. But again, think about the neighborhood plan. It's zooming in from your community plan. It's more granular, and it really helps define how those goals from the community plan are going to be put into action. They take those visions and goals and really start to identify even some project level implementation steps. And that can be a wide variety of things, whether, and Jen, I might not know the slides too well, so feel free, if you've got some other slides here, feel free to cycle through those and I'll roll with them. But for instance, in our downtown plan, again, the community plan said the city was bolstered by downtown district and complementary districts. And then we take that community plan, and we've got a chapter in the neighborhood plan called the Heart of a Thriving City. And so what does it mean for downtown to bolster the rest of the community? Well, then in the chapter of the neighborhood plan that speaks to that, we talk about creating connections within downtown and between the surrounding districts. And we start to talk about, what does that look like? How are we going to accomplish that? We identify, increasing downtown employment opportunities, creating a downtown specific infrastructure plan, because downtowns are obviously almost always the historic district, and you're constantly needing to upgrade sometimes 100-year plus public infrastructure. And so of course the city has an infrastructure plan, but perhaps your downtown needs their own. We talk about the always popular topic of managing and regulating parking, and just get into, again, more specificity, hearkening back to the community plan of the importance of downtown. And so I think that's as a community considers a neighborhood plan, specifically one for downtown. I think these were the main themes of our neighborhood plan, that it'd be inclusive and welcoming to everybody, that our downtown be more than Main Street. Our community continues to grow, and Main Street cannot be everything to everyone. So we felt it was important that our downtown continue to grow in all directions, not just try and cram everything into 8 blocks of our historic Main Street. Again, heart of a thriving city, connected to nature. And then the plan needs to drill down into more recommended projects and initiatives to then further those goals. And again, that can be everything from in our neighborhood plan for downtown, we have an appendix that has I'm forgetting the number, but basically over 30 or 40 specific code amendments. So our plan went so far as to analyze the current municipal and unified development code and recommend code amendments that would help accomplish the goals of the plan. And quite often that is a part that I see missing in some neighborhood plans. They identify what they want to accomplish, and then they perhaps acknowledge that the code is a major influencing factor in whether or not those objectives can be accomplished, but then often fall short of recommending exact code revisions, which is an onerous task. But I can speak at least for talking to my colleagues at the city of Bozeman, and they very much appreciate the specific code language revisions because that gives them something to work with, and it makes their jobs a little bit easier. So it can be everything from code revisions to very common in downtown neighborhood plans is talking about how they want to maybe do streetscape improvements, which a lot of our communities and the communities in Park County have done to various extents. Again, how are you going to manage parking? Acknowledging that parking is a complicated and important component, to be honest, doesn't do anybody a whole lot of good, stating the obvious. But where a plan can really have value is if it can drill down and start to make recommendations on how you would improve a certain component of the neighborhood or your downtown in this case. And then another piece that I'll mention that is often I think overlooked or underserved in a lot of these plans is at the end of the day, a lot of these things end up requiring funding. And so to the extent that a neighborhood plan can start to identify funding sources, but also perhaps even estimating the costs of some of these initiatives and improvements, which again takes some expertise from the planning team or consultants. But often I hear, well, gosh, this plan's great and it looks amazing, but how much would all this cost?
Mm-hmm.
And the worst answer is, of course, not really having an answer. So even if you're able to start to provide some ranges of costs and some estimates, so people get a sense of the scale, and then you can identify potential funding sources. You can identify potential partners. Most of the time, when you're looking to implement a plan, and every plan needs an implementation component. Otherwise, you'll hear the phrase commonly used that, did this great plan and now it's sitting on the shelf collecting dust. Mm-hmm. And they usually end up collecting dust on a shelf because while they maybe painted a picture of what you want the neighborhood to become and what its challenges are and its opportunities, if the plan doesn't have a strong implementation component, including funding and maybe specific code language, then it's less of a tool, to use Jen's word. So identifying on a almost project by project basis, or strategy by strategy basis, what the costs might be. Sometimes there's little to no cost. Code revisions cost time most often, but then costs, funding sources, implementation timelines by project, and even then again, who are the partners that can help make this your goals and strategies become a reality, because again, it literally does take a village. And so but different parts of a plan will have a different set of potential community partners that would be needed to take that strategy and put it into action. So there's a lot of components, and I think but they are extremely valuable. They really provide an opportunity for the community to be engaged and involved. Sometimes at the community plan level, those big, vague phrases and values, sometimes they don't resonate with everybody in the community. But when you start talking about improving sidewalks or adding bike lanes or helping with historic preservation of your old buildings, then people can start to relate to those specific things, and they tend to be engaged. Will engage, and you'll get a different group of people engaging than at some of these other growth policy level efforts. So those are just a few high level thoughts. I'll turn it over to Jen.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Really good points all through there. And you can see how planning can be a complicated thing, starting kind of with this simplistic idea of plans, and then how multi-layered they can be, particularly in a community that has a lot going on, like Bozeman, even like Gardner, and certainly like Livingston. Chris brought up a really good point, and we're going to talk just really briefly about downtown plan for Livingston. So Chris mentioned the idea of updating downtown plans and updating plans in general. Of course, communities don't stay static. And with all plans, including zoning, these things aren't meant to stay the same over time. They're meant to morph over time as a community with its membership changes. So statute talks about updating growth policies or revisiting growth policies every 5 years and doing comprehensive updates every 20 years. So we just saw that with the Park County growth policy 4.5 years ago. They did a comprehensive update. And then we just recently saw that with the Livingston growth policy that was finally adopted this past June, a comprehensive redo of the Livingston growth policy. So as far as the Livingston downtown, the last plan, and I happen to have it here, is this urban design, what is it called? Urban Design Framework Master Plan. And this is from September 2002. As you can see, pretty thick. Just really some great work that went into this. It was originally put together by Antrenko and Alta and a couple of city managers ago. Talks a lot about parking challenges and street art, and a variety of things. What it does not talk about, and if it does, it's just a scant mention, is housing in the downtown. So that's kind of one example of how this 19-year-old plan could benefit from being updated. So a number of years ago, Livingston was part of the Montana Main Street program and dropped from that program for a couple of years ago for a couple of reasons. And Park County Community Foundation, along with the Park County Environmental Council, submitted an application along with the city. There was a partnership of those three entities to have the city of Livingston rejoin the Montana Main Street program. So that application was accepted about, I think it was 2.5 years ago. And the thought was, is to, provide some level of technical expertise and grant opportunities for Livingston's downtown, and to revisit the idea of updating this 19-year-old plan. So not scrapping this plan entirely, but adding to it, and making it more current. So that is in the works right now. I know we have Matthew Menard, the city planner, on this call, and he has been working with us to kind of set the stage for a new downtown plan. One thing that was done this summer, and Matthew, feel free to chime in, is a comprehensive inventory of the downtown, and 2 interns were hired from the Community Design Center at MSU to do this inventory. And basically, the interns took a chunk of the downtown area and inventoried commercial uses, residential uses, vacancies, parking, and so forth. So we've got a really good idea of how downtown is presently being used and what sort of opportunities exist for moving forward. And Matthew, do you want to add anything? Did I miss anything? And you can talk if you want about the second phase of the Community Design Center process. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I don't think you missed anything. I'll talk very quickly about the second phase. So basically, over the summer, as Jen mentioned, they did this inventory. Out of the inventory, I think it's 17 sites. Basically, they picked as quote unquote sites of opportunity downtown. And the senior studio for the MSU architecture program is going to be doing some design interventions or potential designs for those specific sites around downtown as part of their semester project. So hopefully it will give the community a good example of what could be in some of these spaces, or what the potential for some of these spaces are, or a way of visioning what could be different as downtown changes a little bit into the future.
Excellent. Thanks, Matthew. So we have 15 minutes here for questions. I don't know if we still have Michelle. We still have Lynn, Matthew, myself, and Chris all here to help answer. So folks, feel free to either raise your hand, add something to chat, or you can just start talking.
So Jen, I'm here, and I see we did have an excellent question from Jesse Wilcox in the chat, and Matthew responded, but I thought, Jesse, did you get your question answered? Do you want to unmute and ask that again, and we can do any follow-up? I appreciate Matthew responding.
Yeah, no, I am happy to ask the question again. So I was just listening to Lynn's presentation, and it sounded like Gardner could independently zone, or I was questioning whether they could. I know that the county in general is looking at conflict mitigation zoning, but if Gardner wanted to take it a little bit further, I was just curious if they would be able to do that. And so I appreciate Matthew's response to that. It sounds like they could. either through, the county commission initiating that or that citizen initiated zoning. So that was my curiosity.
Yeah, that's correct. And unfortunately, we don't have Mike in from the county today. He'd be able to tell us exactly how many county zoning districts there currently are. I think there are 3 or 4 in Park County, if I've got that right, in the unincorporated areas. Gallatin County, by comparison, has 30 or 40 by comparison. Cook City has zoning and is unincorporated. So that's kind of an example of a community that still falls under the umbrella of the Park County Commissioners, but has its own community zoning.
Right, and if I can jump in, Jen, one of the things I think that obviously, I have a planning design background, so I'm all for zoning. I think it's really important, but we have to some of Chris's points earlier, we have to bring the community along with that and show that we have support. So hence all of these different steps we need to take, including the neighborhood plan, to show we've set direction and we have support for that. And one of the things I think that wasn't brought up here that we have struggled with and are still struggling with, and this ties back a little bit to Park County too and PCEC, you guys work with us on various things out there like mining and other threats to the environment kind of thing. And so with a neighborhood plan with zoning, what are your boundaries? What are you trying to do and where are you trying to do it? Those are some questions that are still a little bit on the table for us. And I'm hoping that we can keep Jen on board to help us figure those things out as we move forward. So.
Yeah, well, thanks, Lynn. I don't know if that's sort of a question for me, but, and I'll just say that, there's, Park County is a big county and we're really happy to be able to help in Gardner and for Jen to be able to give her time as an expert on planning. So yeah, I would say from PCEC's goals and priorities that'll continue. And we share that vision that you said with it, that these processes need to really be community driven from the bottom up. And that's what's so great about the neighborhood planning process. And so, our hope is to help facilitate that, and excited to see what the community of Gardner comes up with. And then when the time comes to do the work of getting it through the county commission, we're here to help with that too. And then as far as, just in general planning in the county, our priority right now is the conflict mitigation process. And that really is basically a permitting process for large scale industrial and commercial threats. And as many of you know, that's been an issue in our county, something that we've all dealt with from all across the county together, kind of battling these big threats. And we've said time and time again to our county commissioners and the planning board, help us. What are our local tools to deal with this? And we really haven't had any, right? We've had to go to Helena or to DC even to deal with these threats. So conflict mitigation gives us a starting point at the local level. And we're excited to see that across the finish line and really would encourage community members to show up and to help us get it there, because the county commission really needs to hear from us that it's something that this community wants. And there's opportunities right now to submit comments and make it better. So I hope that answers Lynn's question. And I see a couple other questions in the chat, so I don't want to chat too much. Where did I lose the chat? Let's see.
I was just going to add to that. We've got a number of planners on the call here today. And I think ultimately from a planning perspective, Lynn, to your point about zoning really is where it kind of all comes down. It's kind of something that, is what we strive for potentially as planners, because it adds predictability. But there are a couple of caveats that really need to go into it. It needs to be community driven, and it needs to fit a particular area. Not all zoning is the same. Bozeman zoning is going to be tremendously different than Gardner's, than Livingston's. There can be a variety of similarities within those regulations and plans, like we saw within the vision statements. But those zoning districts should be crafted for a particular area and crafted with a community, you know, a willing community participating in those processes. So sorry to interrupt there, Michelle, but I had to get that in.
No worries. So a couple other questions in the chat. One for Matthew. Ken Cochran asked if the inventory is available online, and I can't recall if it is done.
I'm not sure what inventory he's referring to. Go ahead.
The
Yeah.
CDC.
CDC inventory, we have not put that online yet.
We have not received that yet. I think they're just finalizing it now. So hopefully we will have a copy of that shortly. I did ask for a digital copy, so it will probably go up on our website when we get it.
And then the other question I see is from Kate Stewart about how do we engage people in planning processes. Kate, do you want to unmute and ask the question?
Sure, yes, and thanks to everybody. I've learned so much today, and I really appreciate PCEC bringing us together and the work that you all are doing. I'm just curious, given the frankly false narratives that are circulating around Park County about the conflict mitigation plan, and you know, the preponderance of false information that we're all dealing with lately. I'm just wondering, you know, are there best practices for getting people engaged, for getting the word out there, for knowing, you know, what are the best channels to put out information or invitations or what it may be, and just what you all have learned about, you know, how can we, I guess, maximize the community-driven aspect of these processes?
That's such a good question. I don't know that I have the answer. I'm going to see if I don't have the answer. I wish I did.
I've got some things to add on that. I'll say
Great.
on that, and then you guys, I do have to jump off. I've got to get to somewhere else, but this has been awesome. So Gardner is your typical, I think, both ends of the spectrum type of a community, and we really struggle with this. Looking back at all the events that we've had, including the Park County growth policy, including the things we've done in the past, including this process, I think the most effective efforts are literally face-to-face meetings and sorry, someone's trying to get my attention. Face-to-face meetings, and if you can't get the people out, literally go in person and talk with different groups that are maybe not your normal mainstream group of people, and you've just got to make the effort to try to reach out in person to them. We have had a bunch of sort of online meetings and things like that. Those don't work very well to reach the naysayers, quite honestly. I think face-to-face community efforts, do your best to find common ground and understand where others are coming from and have good grounded conversations. That's my best answer to that question, I guess.
I think that's a great answer. And if we were to do that, face-to-face conversations would help solve many of the problems both our smaller and larger communities and country actually have. But those false impressions are alive and well. I've worked in the planning field, for the past 20 years, and it's really common. Folks will hear from someone perhaps in Bozeman that you've got to get a permit if you're going to change the color of your house, which actually is not true. But that word gets out, and then all of a sudden that becomes the impression of this evil zoning. And so it is important to sit down with people and have those hard conversations that kind of walk people through the process. And that's really one of the reasons we have these conversations, even though we're not obviously reaching everyone in the community, but we're trying to do that by having separate conversations on the ground too. And I want to jump ahead real quick because speaking of those conversations, the Park County Planning Board is going to reach out specific to the conflict mitigation proposed regulation and host a variety of community meetings. So here is the schedule for next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And those on the call today, if you're able to make one or a couple of those meetings, that would be great. And kind of at first, well, I know we have, I think John Heike's on the call too. I don't know if you want to say anything, John, about misinformation and hosting these meetings in an effort to dispel some of those myths. You can certainly chime in too, Michelle.
No, I think that this is exactly the goal of the planning board, is to have those face-to-face conversations and create a space where they're showing up and listening. So be really great for folks to, if there's one of these meetings in your community, to show up. And then I am just cognizant of the time and we're wrapping up. So I really want to honor our stop time at 1 p.m. and thank everybody for joining today. This was an excellent conversation. Thank you for all the expertise and the hours of work in Gardner and all that you guys are doing. And then encourage folks, we said at the beginning, if we will be sending out our monthly planning newsletter that has all of these meetings and just a whole lot more detail called Crossroads. You can sign up for that at our website, or it's in the chat. And that's where we'll have more information about those upcoming Park County Planning Board meetings. I want to give John, if you want to say anything, John, I'm going to give you the last minute. All right. He's just excited to see you, I'm sure, at the upcoming listening sessions next week. And then there's going to be an in-person full planning board meeting on conflict mitigation the following week. So lots going on. Thank you all so much for being here today. Let us know if you've got any questions further. We're happy to answer them via email. So take care. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.